Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and I thank you for joining me for another episode. This week, my guest is Laurenkeplinger of Laurenkeplinger Com. She's an Etsy seller and also an educator. And so I'm thrilled to have her on the podcast because we have some things in common, which you'll find out as we talk. So Lauren, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are more than welcome. So before we get into it, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found Etsy?
Yeah. Gosh, it feels like it's been forever ago, but I started my Etsy shop back in 2012, making monogrammed baby gifts, and that is still what I make. And so it's kind of just been a crazy wild ride, as I'm sure you can relate. But it has been such a huge thing in my life, and I'm so grateful for the Etsy platform that's allowed this business to grow over the years and to still be a really big part of our family.
You're so modest, Lauren, because what I did plan to say when I was introducing you was that not only have you been on Etsy since 2012, you're almost at 17,000 sales. And what's really impressive is that you make everything that you do by hand. It's all custom and made to order, right?
It is. Yes, it is.
How do you make almost 17,000 of those? It's like, it just blows my mind. That's quite an accomplishment.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how did you get into monogramming? What attracted you to that particular craft, and how did you hone your skills?
Well, I actually think I have kind of a different journey than a lot of Etsy sellers in terms of how I ended up there, because I bought an embroidery machine with the purpose of teaching myself how to do it so that I could sell it. So I didn't really start out as a hobby maker. I started with the intent to have like a side gig.
Okay.
So I had very young kids at the time, and I just bought this embroidery machine and started making things for my own kids. And then of course I had a lot of friends that had young kids because that was the stage of life that I was in, and we lived in South Georgia, so monograms are really popular. And so I kind of just went from there, and I practiced, and I made a lot of really ugly things. And I jumped into selling them probably way before I was really ready or my products were really ready. But, I think that part of what I saw in retrospect, I don't know that I would tell people to do it exactly that way, because I do think I put out kind of questionable products in the beginning, but because there was only so many things that I could make for my own children and for people that I knew, it allowed me to have these orders coming in where I could kind of be practicing. Like, it was a much bigger volume once I started selling it. So my abilities and the quality of my products improved really rapidly because I was practicing so much more.
Oh, nice. Did you have any fears sometimes when you would get an order for something that you'd never made before?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I also had fears, and I honestly still do, even all these years later, when I have things that people that I know order, or people that will have custom orders, or a friend or something that I'm like, oh, I hope they like it. I hope after all these sales and all these years that it actually doesn't turn out that these products are terrible and everybody hates them.
Yeah. That's so funny that even after so many sales, you still have that concern that, maybe the end user won't like, well, the end user will be a baby, but the mom or the dad or the gift giver.
Yeah, I think it never really, I don't know that, at least for me, it's never really gone away. So when people tell me like, I'm just really nervous. I feel like I'm not qualified to make this, or I have this imposter feeling
Yeah.
or whatever. I'm like, yeah, we all kind of do.
Yes. Yeah. And it doesn't go away. I mean,
Not for me.
maybe it diminishes. Would you say at least it's diminished a bit?
It has. I mean, I feel good at this point about the quality of the products that I produce, and I feel good about my skill level in making them.
Yeah.
When people, I mean, obviously the more sales you have, there are going to be people who are not happy with what they get. And I feel more confident now in saying, like, I'm sorry that you didn't like it, but I still am like confident in the product that I'm putting out.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, why did you pick embroidery? Did you already have an affinity for that, or what? Why embroidery?
Um, I don't really know. I know I didn't really have any history of like doing any kind of sewing or anything. I had a family member that was making birthday shirts, and so she had an embroidery machine, and she kind of helped me to like get set up in that initial stage. Even though I wasn't making the same product, but there was enough overlap that she could kind of guide me with that. So I think it was kind of just an easy in for me.
Okay. So one of the things that I think you can really speak to is, because everything you make is custom and made to order, and you have a high sales volume, time management and productivity must be something that you have figured out along the way over the past, 8 years going on. And I know that you've said this somewhere, that you've been able to cut your work hours down to 10 a week or less and still maintain a good volume of sales. So can you help us with time management? How do you manage it, and what tips do you have to share?
Yeah, that's been a really big, important part of it for me, because it took me a very long time to figure out how to balance that. There were a lot of years that I felt like I was really working. I mean, I didn't feel like I was really working a lot. And so that's been something that's kind of evolved as I've gone. But I think that the biggest thing for me has been to really narrow down what I sell. If you look at my shop, there's only a couple products in there. So there is not a wide variety of products. And that allowed me to focus in on the products that have the highest profit margins for me, while also taking the least amount of time to make. So while I had a lot of other products, and this has really been within the last, I would say, 1.5 or 2 years that I narrowed it down a lot. And I had a lot, like hundreds and hundreds of listings in my shop prior to that, where they were using, different patterns and different fabrics and different colors. And it was really time consuming to switch from one thing to the next thing. So to narrow it down and to really focus in on those things that had the higher profit margins has really transformed the way I've been able to run my shop.
Okay. Well, that makes perfect sense. And I know sometimes I shouldn't say people, let me say we in general are afraid to cut back for fear that we're cutting off additional income streams. But how much time did you give yourself to figure out which were your high margin products, so that you knew which ones you needed to focus on to get more bang for your buck, and then which ones still brought a profit but just not enough to make it worth your while? What would you suggest is a good sample of time for a seller to look at in order to really pick the right product to focus on?
I would say for me, it was probably at least a year, maybe closer to 1.5 years, where I was carrying all of the products and then was able to narrow it down. And it was really, really scary for me because I still have people, a lot of the things that I made prior to kind of weeding them out were burp cloth sets for babies. And I still have people that come back and say, you made this burp cloth set for me, 2 or 3 years ago, and I really want one that matches. And I probably get a message a week with people asking me if I will still make them.
And will you?
And I just have to say, no, sorry. And they normally do not, if that's what they're looking for, they don't buy from me anymore. Like they move on to somebody that can make that product. So there is a loss of sales, I guess, in that way.
Yeah.
I haven't seen my overall revenue go down, which to me, and this is, I think some of it is dependent on where you're coming from. If you're doing it from a purely like artistic, creative perspective, then that's going to be kind of a different mindset, I guess, in terms of how you're approaching it. For me, it really is purely a business decision to say these products make me the most profit and they take the least amount of time. And even though they are not as like creatively fulfilling for the business, it makes sense. And I can get my creative fulfillment somewhere else.
Nice. I like that. So it seems like you've taken more of because, as creatives, we know we need to focus on the business side, but the creative side tends to dominate. But you've kind of flipped that. It sounds like you make your decisions based on, like, I shouldn't say based on, but it sounds like you make very practical business decisions without letting your creative spirit, drive you too far down the road that's not going to be profitable.
Right. And I think that is something that that I do have a different perspective than a lot of sellers. And I've always loved kind of the business aspect of it. So that is fulfilling to me to watch to have the challenge of growing a shop and having it be more profitable and looking at those numbers beyond just the creativity side of it.
Yeah.
I do have 3, about to be 4 children of my own. So I find, I will make things for my own kids. I will make things for friends' kids. I will do that kind of stuff, but that's on my terms.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I see. Now, based on demand and because people come to you and ask for specific things, have you ever considered opening a second or maybe a complimentary shop? And for anyone who wants to check out Lauren's Etsy shop right now, it's Funky Monkey Children on Etsy. Have you ever had thoughts of maybe opening up a second store for just a different product line? Or I guess that would be counterproductive to why you streamlined your product lines anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I have gone down that road in the past. When I had all of the burp cloth sets and everything, there were a lot of products in, like I was doing baby gowns and hooded towels for babies and all kinds of stuff. But then I also opened a second shop that I was going to do birthday shirts as well. And I quickly decided that trying to manage both shops and to just further split my time was more than I really could handle.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, over the years, has your pricing strategy changed at all in how you determine what you're going to charge for your products?
Yeah, I would say for sure. When I first started on Etsy, I felt a lot of pressure. People say this now, but they said it 8 years ago too. Like, oh, there's just too much competition on Etsy and you'll never be able to get found and everything. Well, they were still saying that in 2012 when I started. So I felt like the only way to be visible or to be able to be successful was to be the absolute cheapest one. Like that's the only thing that sets you apart. And I very quickly found, as I'm sure most people who fall into that trap find, that it's extremely difficult to have any kind of profit margins if you are the absolute cheapest. you're really not attracting the kind of buyer that you necessarily want to attract that's bargain shopping. I actually wouldn't say that most Etsy buyers necessarily are bargain shopping, because I don't think Etsy's really known for like rock bottom prices. So I think for me, it became something, and especially as I got busier and valued my own time more in terms of how much I was working, it got more important to me to have value in the product beyond just the pricing. So whether that was for a very long time, one of the ways I set myself aside or set myself apart was to be able to get things out really quickly. So a lot of made to order items on Etsy, people have like 4 to 6 week turnaround times.
Yeah.
And I would have like a 3-day turnaround time.
Oh. Okay.
And so I had like a lot of sales from those kinds, which again, you kind of have to look at who you're attracting when that's true. So you're getting a lot of last minute shoppers, which is kind of stressful.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I've done is to be really willing to work with people who are wanting to ship it as a gift, because a lot of the things that I sell, people are buying as a baby shower gift. And so to be able to package it and include a gift note and all of these things has helped as well. So they feel comfortable shipping it directly to the person who's receiving it.
Oh, nice. So when you do that, and this is separate from, is this, do you do it differently than the gift wrapping option that Etsy makes available? Or that's what you use?
No, that's what I use. Although
Okay.
I did it before they started offering it, but that obviously made it easier for you to kind of upsell them in that way.
Yes. Oh, nice. So, talking about being on Etsy for a while and pricing for the types of customers you want, in the time that you've been selling, have you had any negative experiences, like with unhappy customers or people who weren't satisfied? And I know you mentioned that you said something to that effect before, but how do you follow through and handle that? And do you ever try to turn it around into, a 5-star if they were, maybe on the 3-star side?
Yeah, I think that I would love to meet anybody that has been on Etsy for 8 years and never had an unhappy customer, because I don't know how that would be possible.
Yeah.
I definitely have had unhappy people. I would say it is like a very, very small minority. So it's not something that I knock on wood, not something that I deal with on a frequent basis, but it definitely does happen. I have a tendency to get really defensive when I have bad feedback or somebody that comes back and says that they don't like something. So the thing that I have learned about myself over the years is that I have to take at least 24 hours before, or at least like a night. If they do it, if they email me at night or whatever, I have to wait until the next morning before I can respond, because if I respond right away, then usually it's not like kind of customer service that I want to provide. I also usually run it by my husband, because for me, I'm doing this every day, looking at these monograms all the time. And I know what I'm doing and what it's supposed to look like and everything. So I'll ask my husband, and a lot of times he will agree with the customer. So,
really?
if they say, sometimes people will not like a font that they chose, or they don't like the way that the font ended up looking or whatever. And he'll say, well, yeah, I think that looks kind of weird. And, so I think, a lot of times I don't want to say a lot of times, because it doesn't happen a lot of times, it is, like I said, a very, very small minority of people, but, I have to kind of look at the bigger picture and say, it's really stressful to me when people are unhappy. I don't want, and I don't want unhappy customers, and I don't want a case opened against me or anything. So what does it look like to just take care of it in the way that they want it taken care of, versus like fighting with them about it and then having it drag on for a week or 2 weeks or whatever? Yeah.
So does that mean that you'll outright ask a customer, how can I make this right? Or do you just immediately offer a refund?
Oh no, I don't. I do not immediately offer a
Okay.
refund.
Okay.
I am actually really not big on offering refunds, because everything is made to order and
Yeah.
personalized, and a lot of
Oh
times they
yeah.
are the ones that are picking. They're picking the font and stuff. So if they don't
Mm.
like it, then that's because they chose something that they didn't like.
Yeah, yeah.
um, so I will. Sometimes I will give them. I would say one thing that has worked well in the past for people is like, especially if they have selected a font that then they end up not liking,
Mm-hmm.
I will offer them a replacement at a really heavy discount. So
Oh, okay.
basically, I'm like barely breaking even, or maybe not even breaking even on the product,
Mm.
but they're able to order one and change up what they don't like, and then still it covers my costs. Like I'm not having to
Yeah.
refund the whole order.
Okay. Well, yeah, that sounds better than having them ship it back, and then you have a product that if you did use their monograms, what are the chances that you're going to get
Yeah.
somebody else with the exact same? I mean, use their initials with the exact
Right,
same
and same
initials.
colors and everything. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not really like beneficial to me to have people send stuff back. So
Yeah.
my ultimate goal is to have them keep the item and figure out a way that they're going to be happy, whether that's like
Mm.
a 50% refund, or,
Yeah.
buying another one at a discount, or
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. But
Yeah.
I'm not one to jump to refunds, because I think that a lot of Etsy sellers jump to refunds too quickly because they're afraid of a
Mm-hmm.
bad review.
Yeah. It's a real fear.
Yeah, it is. And especially in the climate now, well, not right this second, but before all of the COVID stuff happened with
Mm-hmm.
the ODR rates and stuff, that, you do have to be aware of how many
Yeah.
people are unhappy.
Yes. Yeah, true. Well, thanks for sharing that. And thanks for being honest about getting defensive about things you make, because, yes, I know how that can be too. I don't hand make stuff that I sell on Etsy, but like if I write a blog post and somebody says something that I don't agree with, I'm like, "Ugh, okay,
Right.
they're entitled to their own opinion. It's okay that
Yeah.
it doesn't
It's
align
hard
with
though. I
yours."
mean, it's really hard to,
It is, yeah.
you feel like you're working really hard. And so when
Yes.
somebody comes back at you, whether it is a product or, a review or a blog
Mm-hmm.
post or whatever, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing the best I can. Jeez.
Yes. Or bad podcast review. I remember crying the first time I saw one. I was like, then please just don't listen.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I have also been there.
How you promote your Etsy shop or your products, how has your promotional strategy changed over the years, and what are you doing now to drive traffic to your products and to your shop?
I think that early on, I felt like I had to do a lot of promotion of my own to drive sales to my shop. So I had like a VIP Facebook group and a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and I was trying to like build an email list and doing all of these things to try and build this sort of community around my Etsy shop. And it was extremely time consuming. Um, and what ended up happening is that between the actual Etsy work and making orders, and then I started my shop when I only had one child. So I have added to my family as the shop has grown as well. And
Yeah.
so my time to work has been limited by that. And so over the years, I kind of felt like this marketing part of it is taking up so much time, and I'm not necessarily seeing a return on it. So a huge part of the strategy that has changed for me is to really utilize the traffic that comes organically from Etsy. And I honestly don't really do any promotion of my shop at this point. It pretty much all comes from SEO on the platform.
Okay. And so for you, does that mean right when you're making a listing, you're optimizing your titles and your tags and then just letting Etsy search take it from there?
Yep, pretty much.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been a huge mindset change for me, because
Yeah.
it was a little bit scary for me at first to give up what I felt like was the control and to just use the traffic from Etsy. But ultimately, it's been super freeing, because the shop kind of is self-propelling, and I don't really have to do anything in terms of promoting it.
Yeah.
So I can just work on the orders and then I'm done, and I don't have to worry about, trying to come up with Instagram captions and stuff.
Yeah. So does that mean you're not on social media at all? You don't do any social media promotion?
I still have an Instagram account and there's still a Facebook page, but I don't really do anything with them.
Nice. Okay. So do you ever feel algorithm changes, like, when people say like their listings aren't showing up, which, now I know it's a lot more complicated than looking for your listings and not seeing them. But do you find that sometimes you see ebbs and flows or peaks and troughs based on changes within Etsy search, or it's so minute that it doesn't really affect your business?
I would say that I am really, really aware of the changes. Etsy doesn't usually throw in like curveballs that you're not expecting. So they do usually give you heads up, like when they implemented free shipping and things like that.
Yes.
So I'm very aware of the upcoming changes, and I'm also not like married to any one thing with my listings. Like there are a lot of people, especially with the free shipping, that was like so controversial for people.
Yes.
Where they're like, I'm not doing free shipping. I don't believe in free shipping.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's kind of like, I just roll with the punches. I do what they tell me to do. And, I make that work for my business because it's more important to me to continue to have a successful shop than it is to dig in my heels and say, like, I am not going to do this. I see normal ebbs and flows with, it's easier for me now because I've been on Etsy for so long that I know, when there's going to be an ebb and flow seasonally and throughout the year and whatever. So I think that for the advice that I would have for people is, if you see the ups and downs, to not be immediately reactive. Like if I begin to see a slowdown, I'm going to give it at least several weeks before I say like, oh my gosh, I haven't, my sales are slowing down.
Yeah.
Before I even think about being panicked about it.
Okay.
Because there are going to be natural ebbs and flows. And sometimes, there's sometimes that just sales slow down for a little bit and then they pick back up again. And there really wasn't necessarily any reason. It just happens.
Yeah.
So to not immediately begin to like change everything up, especially if it was previously working.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great advice. So now can we transition to Laurenkeplinger.com? How did that come about, and when did you decide to branch out and become an education specialist? Actually, I just gave you that title. I don't know if that's what you refer to yourself as.
Yeah, I started that about, I guess it's been about 2 years at this point. And it kind of just came, I have a huge passion for the business side of running an Etsy shop and to really, make it a real profitable business for myself. And then it's kind of overflowed into other people as well. And what I saw was that there are a lot of people who have a huge passion for the creative part, and they're so good at what they're doing, but they really struggle with how to make that into a business that's not going to just like suck the life out of them and take up all of their time for not very much money. And honestly, having an Etsy shop has really changed it sounds like really, cheesy to say, but it's really changed our lives. And so I feel just incredibly grateful for the position that I'm in my Etsy shop and what that's done for us, but also just being able to share that with people and to say like, you really can do this and it can be a profitable business for you.
Do you think that anybody with any product can be profitable or on Etsy? Or if someone were to come to you who was just starting out and had a product, would you be able to, or would you, if you thought it wasn't going to be profitable, advise them of that?
I would say 99% of products can sell well and can be profitable on Etsy.
Okay.
I do find that there are times that people really struggle to figure out where they want to go with it or what they want to do. And so they're kind of all over the place with their shop. And that is something that I really have to push people to. There's a whole lot of people that come into the community that will say, like, I make X product and I want to add A, B, C, D, E, F, G products to it. And to, like you said before, like, we have this creative side that kind of takes over, and you're like, I want to do everything and I want to make everything and I have all of these interests that I love. But to just say, like, that's all fine and well, but they don't necessarily all need to be a part of your shop.
Yeah. Okay. So on Laurenkeplinger.com, and for anyone who wants to go check it out, I will have the link to Lauren's website in the show notes for this episode, but you can easily hop over there as well. It's Laurenkeplinger, KEPLINGER.com. So you started off writing blog posts, and now you also host a podcast, which we were talking before. I feel like I've been in a fog because I haven't listened to your podcast. So I'm going to, and if you finish listening to this episode and you need more inspiration to listen to, as an Etsy seller, you want to learn more, Lauren, tell us about your podcast and what you talk about.
Yeah, the podcast is called Crickets to Cha-Chings.
And
thanks. I talk through I started out pretty much like step-by-step instructions of like picking a topic and then diving into that deeper. It's kind of evolved, as you know, these things do.
Yeah.
It's kind of evolved since then, but I get a lot of questions. I have a Facebook group, and I'll get a lot of questions in there that people will ask that I'll say, it's really hard for me to just answer this question like in a little tiny Facebook thing. So this is something that I'd love to dive into in a podcast episode where I have the ability to just feel like I'm actually talking to you versus just like, writing up this little blip. Yeah. So it's fun though. I love doing the podcast.
Yes. And it's work, isn't it?
It is a ton of work.
Yes. So you also have video trainings and courses. What's the difference between the two?
Well, I have a free masterclass that talks about SEO and some of the mistakes that I see people make. The courses are paid programs where I really can dive deeper in with people and work with them. The SEO program that I have that's a paid program has an ongoing element of like monthly question and answers, and where I can look at your listings and critique it and really dive in deeper with people who want to have that impact and move forward in their business in a serious way.
Okay. And so one of the courses is for sellers who are just getting started, people who are just coming onto the platform.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit more about that? How much time investment can one expect when they start the course, and how long do you think it will take for them to be up and running after going through it?
Yeah, I would say the course itself, if you just sat and watched all of the videos, is probably maybe 3 to 4 hours. But obviously the implementation of stuff takes longer than that.
Yes.
The beginner course really helps people to think through the business side of things. So we talk through, figuring out a product to sell in your shop that's going to be profitable for you and that's not going to be this huge time suck. Where you're going to be making something that takes 3 hours to make, but you can only sell it for $20 or something. And then we talked through, a lot of people really struggle with how to price their products and how to ship physical products if they're selling something that's not digital, and sort of all of those aspects for the beginner person that's coming in. I would say that they could be up and running really as quickly as they wanted to be. But one thing that I am a really big advocate of as an educator and a coach is that this is not an overnight thing. Like, this is not going to be, I've had people email me before that say, I want to take your course. I can't pay my rent this month and I need my shop profitable by next week. And I'm like, this is not the right thing for you.
Yeah.
Please do not buy my course. Because, there's no guarantee in business, but I think that if you put the work in, it can definitely work for you and be profitable. But it is a long range plan. It's not a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah. And is it good for just primarily handmade sellers, or will someone who sells vintage items or supplies also benefit from it?
Anybody, I would say any of the categories that fall on Etsy. I think that while I think some of the intricacies of like writing SEO and stuff are different if you're selling something like, for instance, vintage, where you can only sell it one time versus selling it over and over again. But the basics of running a business and especially getting that business started and everything, I think, are the same regardless of the actual product.
Okay, good to know. And for a seller who has been on Etsy for a while and maybe is not in the beginning stages, but is also doesn't have the traction that they want, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, my biggest recommendation really is SEO, and that is where I spend the most time coaching and educating people, is with SEO, because it really has transformed my shop and my ability to continue with my shop as it's grown, by not having to feel like I was doing all of this marketing and spending all of this time, but also just to get better results overall. So that is the biggest thing that I see people, especially if they've been on the platform for a while, but it's kind of stagnant. Like, they're not seeing, there is time that it takes to grow and to kind of get the ball rolling. But if the ball never really rolls, you're kind of just like stuck in this place where you're like, I've been selling on Etsy for 5 years and it's still like not really working. Or even like a year or two and it's still not even working. And you're really not having consistent sales. Almost 100% of the time, it's a problem with SEO. Like, there are so many buyers on Etsy that are primed and ready to come in and buy things if you can just get your products in front of them. And so it's not a matter of like, I need to make more Instagram posts so I can drive my own traffic. Of harnessing this traffic that's already there.
And SEO it can feel daunting, especially for that seller who's been around for a while and has just the thought of going back to start from scratch can feel intimidating. What would you advise that person? Where should they begin?
I think that first off, some of it is just a mindset block of like, oh, it's confusing and it's technical and I can't do this. It is totally learnable. And once you learn how to do it, then you can apply it to new listings or a new shop that you want to open. Or like, I had people, when all this coronavirus stuff started, that used the SEO information that they had and started selling masks, and then, sold thousands and thousands of masks. Because they were able to actually get their product seen in the middle of this uptick of people searching for them. So I think some of that is just the matter of being willing to take this step and dive into it. And then again, I would say patience. Like, it is not something that's going to next week make your shop like take off. It is a long range plan, but I mean, people have incredible results just by optimizing their SEO, even
Yeah.
people that have been on the platform for a long time.
Yes. And that's how the platform is designed to work for anyone who's, who feels like nothing is happening there or nothing they do on social media is helping to move the needle. Really, Etsy is designed to have the best results when you understand how their search works.
Yeah.
And then you tailor your shop and your listings to what's the word I'm looking for? To work harmoniously with Etsy search.
Yeah.
It's not like very mysterious, but it is work. It can be.
It's definitely something you have to learn. I wouldn't say that it's intuitive at all. But what I tell people is if you're going to have an Instagram and a Facebook and an email list and all these things that you're doing and you're like hustling for every single sale and you're, having paid advertisements on Facebook and stuff, you might as well not be on Etsy because the biggest benefit to Etsy is that it has this built-in traffic for you. So if you're not taking advantage of that, it's a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. Now, are there any particular tools or resources that you use in running your own business that you find particularly helpful and you don't mind sharing with us?
I guess the biggest one that I would say, really, and this is like very simplistic and not at all exciting, but is Google Sheets. I use Google Sheets instead of like, what is that software that they advertise?
Excel?
Yeah, or the tax one that I can't remember the name of right now. Yeah.
Okay.
So I used QuickBooks for a while and I found it to be kind of confusing to use. So I just went back to a basic spreadsheet, but I do an end of the month, like P&L sheet, profit and loss every month. And just to have the actual numbers in front of me. I used to kind of bury my head in the sand about the numbers.
I think we all did at some point.
Yeah. And so then, it would be 6 months into the year or even at the end of the year. And I would say, well, geez, I wish I would have known that I was spending all this money or I was wasting all this money or whatever. I wish I would have known where I was financially so that I could have kind of, changed courses somewhere along the way. And it would be too late at that point for me to really do anything about it. So I started doing it on a month by month basis. And it's been really eye-opening for me to just have like a constant kind of running tally of how much I'm spending and what my expenses are and what my profits are. And then I have like a year-to-date column so I can see where I'm at for profits and stuff for the year.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that. I also, right now, that's what I'm doing. I use a Google Sheets document. And like you said, it's so true. Initially, there was a time where I was like, I don't want to know if I'm getting sales, it's fine.
Right.
But it really is not necessarily fine until you actually you can see the numbers, the concrete numbers and see how much is coming in, how much you're putting aside for taxes and all whatnot. And yes, I know there are many tools out there, and I've talked to people on the podcast who, use some really, nice tools that can do all kinds of things. But if you just want to get, a firm grip on what's going on in your business, then just start with Google Sheets. Just start putting stuff in there. And then as you graduate and you need to start, looking at history and what have you. Yeah, maybe you can use one of the other tools, but it's nice to start simply because then at least you know what numbers you need to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about, eliminating products and being afraid of having a decrease in sales. And ultimately, at least from my perspective, when I look at those numbers, even if the overall number decreases, that doesn't necessarily mean the profits decrease if you can really maximize your profits. So it's important to know where you stand with that. Or, if you have $200,000 a year in sales, but you have $180,000 a year in expenses, then that's not great.
Yes, exactly. So Lauren, before we as we wrap up, what advice do you have for someone who's listening now, and just parting words to maybe give encouragement or something else?
Yeah, I think that my biggest advice for somebody who is just starting out would be to move forward, even if you're afraid, or you're afraid of failing, or you feel like you can't do it. And allow yourself to like really step into the goal that you have, and know what that goal is, whether it is to have a side hustle or a full-time job or whatever it looks like for you. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody, but to really allow yourself to step into that being a goal that you want to chase after, because it really is possible. And there are a lot of people that get bogged down looking at what they want it to be so far in the future, and then they end up getting discouraged in the shorter term. And so, to look at, like, I have people that come in and say, well, I don't know if I could ever do that, or I don't know that I could ever build a shop like yours or whatever. And I'm like, I started out with an embroidery machine that I bought at a yard sale.
And a yard sale? Was it even Michael's?
No, it wasn't even like a legit one. And, and like, I didn't start out where I am right now. And you're looking at it so many years later, and it's easy to kind of skip over all that in the meantime. But your goals and your abilities can shift and change as you go along, but you have to be willing to step into being uncomfortable in that first part.
Thank you. I think that's so important too, because I know even now I still find myself sometimes, projecting where I want to be, but not really considering that it's a journey to get there.
Right.
So
I mean, everybody wants to be like 10 steps ahead of where they are, but not have to go through those 9 steps to get there.
Yes. So thank you. That is encouraging, and it's good food for thought, something to remember just as we round up. If folks want to connect with you and just continue this conversation, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, I would say they can go to my website is Laurenkeplinger.com. And there's also links on there for the Facebook group that I have, which I'm very active in as well.
Okay, great. So, and I will link to Lauren's website. If you go to convome.com, I will have a link going directly back to Laurenkeplinger.com, so you can go check that out as well. And I'll also, if you don't mind, link to your Etsy shop, just so folks can hop over and, maybe do some baby gift shopping too.
Yeah, for sure.
Lauren, thank you so much for taking time out to talk with me. By the time this airs, you'll have a new baby in your arms, so congratulations on that too.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I bet. And I thank you also for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to connect with me, you can go to convome.com and that's convome.com and click on the contact tab, or email me at interview@convome.com. I don't even know my own website. And if you're on social media right now, Instagram is probably the best place to connect with me, and that's at Convome Podcast. If you've missed any of my EtsyU trainings, be sure to also go to the trainings and workshops tab over at convome.com, and you will be able to access recordings of the previous trainings and also see what additional live workshops are coming up. Again, thank you for listening to the podcast, and I will be back next week.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.